You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy. You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy.
Tracy, how you doing? Welcome.
I am great. It is so good to be here with you
Oh
today.
my goodness, I feel like this has been a long time coming, but I think we were pretty quick once we connected with you and the TroopHR team. We've had a lot of conversations actually related to podcasting, not related, and so it's an honor to finally have you on the show.
Absolutely. And once we got that intro from a troop member, it was like full speed ahead with the relationship, which we've been very much enjoying with you and your team at the Modern People Leader.
Well, a little later, I'll share what jumped out, what stuck out to me. I think Daniel as well, when we heard about TroopHR and your community, and we're going to talk at length about what you've created, the amazing things that you've created. But before we do that, we have a tradition. Our first tradition is called Good News Stories. We all share a personal or work related story from the past week or two to kick things off with a little positivity, a little gratitude. We prefer for our guests to go first, but if you need some time, I'm sure Daniel can kick us off. What do you have, Tracy?
I actually have something that occurred over the weekend and was kind of solidified this morning. And part of being in the troop community is to help our members sort of grow through their career journeys, transition into new roles, level up. And it's a tough market out there right now. You know, the macro environment certainly is sharing a story with all of us. And that's the reality of what we're seeing in our little micro community as well. And so I actually got 2 DMs from troop members who received offers over the weekend from roles that they found from the troop community. And so when you think about how many jobs are out there on LinkedIn, which obviously LinkedIn serves a great purpose, but much larger. And the fact that within our little environment, we were able to help two of our members who've been out of work land in their next roles is just a reminder of why we do what we do and the impact that we're having on people's lives. And so it was really nice to open up the DMs this morning and say, I'm taking the role and taking the new job. And that's something that will last with that person for a long time, hopefully. So I think that, to me, when I hear those member stories, there's really nothing better than the success that we're having in HR leaders' lives.
It's rough
That's
out
awesome.
there. So that is great news. Daniel, you want to go next?
Well, first off, congratulations to those two people. That's awesome. There's honestly like way too much good news. I mean,
That's a good thing considering the environment, Daniel. I mean, that's good to hear.
I mean, this has been probably two of the busier weeks at the Modern People Leader. So we had our first ever MPL Live in Austin, and other than like a few minor hiccups, it was a huge success. I am fully bought into the idea of throwing these live events. I get it. It was awesome getting to meet a lot of our listeners in person, but also like kind of like getting to reunite with some of our past guests. So not only the speakers, David, Gianna, Katie, Jessica, but people like Alex Seiler. I'm probably Angela Shaw. Like I could probably just keep naming people that were there, but it exceeded my expectations. I'll just say that. So that's my first good news. And then we had HR Tech last week. And HR Tech for us is not only a place for us to get to hang out with our people and the people that listen to the show, but also like it's a huge sales opportunity for us getting to meet with vendors. And I think we did well. I think we've learned from the past conferences that we've gone to, and I'm really excited coming out of last week.
Congratulations. It's always great to hear.
Thank you.
I'm going to kind of build off of your good news, like ditto to everything Daniel said. Like the event was amazing. I was sharing before we hit record that I was looking at our survey results from the event, and we had a positive 82 net promoter score, which as a founder of an engagement survey company, like I really believe in the importance of data, and we had great feedback. I think there's clear areas where we can create an even better experience, and there was some good constructive feedback there. And so I love to see that. When it's all too positive or it's all too negative, it's hard to for me to really engage with the feedback. When it's nice and balanced, I feel like that's like the sweet spot in terms of what I'm looking for. So everything, a lot of positive things there. I think my general good news leaving HR Tech, I am hopeful about the next HR tech cycle. I have concerns. And in many ways, I left more confused about some things more questions than answers, particularly around AI. But it was, there's something electric about being with founders and working with founders and just chatting with them. I guess my last good news is we essentially launched my new business line within the Bonner People Leader as well, which is called MPL Grow. Tracy, we've chatted about this in the past, so it's officially happened. When you have these big, meaty quarterly goals or OKRs, you have to prioritize them. And we prioritize MPL Live first because we wanted to get that. We know it was going to be an ongoing thing. So the sooner we got that live, the better. But with HR Tech, we launched MPL Grow, which is really, really exciting. Today's topic is not MPL Grow. So if y'all are interested, hit me up. I'm happy to chat about it. But we're here today to talk about Tracy and TroopHR. And so I want to hear your story. We call this a Brene Brown question, and I love your story. I'm a big fan of non-traditional, non-linear path to the HR space. And so share with us, what's that journey like for you, and what led to you creating TroopHR?
And congrats on Grow. One of our battle cries at Troop is real world insights from real world experts. And so, you and I had talked about, the impact that you'll have with so many of these organizations and entrepreneurs. So really excited for that. So my story. So yes, I do not come from a traditional HR background. The first 10 years of my career were in business development at large enterprise organizations in healthcare. And in business development, my job was really about building out partnerships and alliances and relationships. And so just like so many other people, I got the startup bug and made a transition to a 10-person health tech startup. Culture shock. We were venture backed and we were in the on-demand healthcare space. And in 2012, people did not know what that meant. And our clients were other tech startups because they were early adopters. And the point person within those organizations was the head of people. And so our founder said, oh, you should attend the HR roundtable for our VC and get to know some of the HR leaders in the space. And so I did. And I had said to a friend of mine there, wouldn't it be great if we could just get together and share ideas and best practices and just be resources for each other? And she said, of course, if you want to plan something, I'm there. And so back in 2012, I hosted a small dinner with 15 heads of people from early stage startups in New York City. And people just loved the connection, getting to know each other, hearing that other people were going through the same challenges. And so I started making it a regular occurrence, hosting quarterly dinners and breakfasts. Couple years into it, started a weekly newsletter. I will say very grassroots, and people just started reaching out to me as the resource. And I was always at the center of things. Fast forward a lot, COVID happens, obviously changed everything for everyone. And a lot of my friends and colleagues were reaching out with challenges. And what was really eye opening to me was it wasn't even about COVID. It was about being in this new world of work and navigating this uncharted territory that no one in the world had ever been through. And that was when I decided I wanted to take what I had been doing and really substantiate it, and came up with the idea of Troop, that not only would we focus on HR education, but in a change, really focus on the professional and how we could support each other and elevate each other. And so that was what led to TroopHR being born. And I will say, launching a community is not an easy task because different people have different needs. And so before we actually did our launch, we interviewed over 50 HR leaders to get perspective of what they wanted out of education, content, connections. And we were able to formulate the first iteration of Troop based off of those conversations.
And so I feel like I have an idea of what you do every day because in some ways what we do is similar, but I'd be curious to hear it from you. What does a day or a week look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always say the favorite part of my day is getting to meet prospective members. And that's because you get to hear lots of different people's stories. Everyone has similar needs, different needs. And so on a typical day, I'll talk to 3 to 5 prospective members. I'll engage with 3 to 5 existing members over email. I am very accessible. I say I like to be an active member in the community because it's a community. And so we are all there to support each other. And I would say that takes up about 85% of my time. The other 15%, we ourselves are a small startup. So rolling up my sleeves, running the operations, doing what needs to be done to make sure that we're optimizing the member experience. That is our North Star.
And so earlier I mentioned that Troop HR really jumped out to Daniel and I. And at first, I think happened, we had heard of you all through the years, just through interviews, through people in our community. But then we started experimenting with events. We had a couple dinners and we realized that like at these dinners, the most vocal people, engaged people, either members of Troop HR or were talking about Troop HR. And it just like really stuck out to us in a positive way of like, wow, it feels like whatever they're doing at Troop HR, they really nailed a format. And I want to start with, in your view, what does community mean to HR leaders? And what is for you, what is the key thing in getting and truly building a lasting community?
I'll go backwards. A lasting community is when it is about the people in the community and the members and not about me. Because if it were about me, it would be self serving and it would be about the corporation. And that's not what community is. And so it's about the people and how we can evolve together based on the needs. And going back to being a small startup ourselves, we can be stealthy. We can make changes and iterate, and we do. And we're not afraid to do so based on the needs of the people. You know, right on our homepage, it says for the modern people leader, because very coincidental, but because it's about people who want to not only make an impact on themselves, their growth, but the overall function as a whole and the impact we have within our organizations, which then trickles around the world. Going back to what made the community, it was looking for ways that people can engage beyond just being a transactional message board, making them feel part of something, not as an add-on, but as the core. And so many of our members and prospective members say, on an island by myself, I'm a team of one, I'm a team of a few. It's lonely. I don't get the buy-in I need from my leadership team. And so our community is 100% organically grown, meaning that 65% of our members come from referrals from existing members, and the balance from our presence on social and referrals from people in our network. And because of that, many of our members are encountering similar challenges to one another. So now they have a safe space where they're not alone, where they can talk to other professionals who walk the walk and talk the talk that they do. And so they feel supported. I always say supported and celebrated because we celebrate too, because there are achievements, whether it's getting a new job, getting a new certification, launching a new event. And we're also, I think for TroopHR, all of our members are experienced. They're a minimum of 8 years. The majority of them have over 15, but they're not all 25 to 30-year professionals. And so because we look at the industry, and you can have a head of people at a startup with 8 years of experience. And even though they don't have the 25, they're still encountering the same challenges. And so Troop has given them this place where they can hear from the experienced people with 25 years, or they can hear from the people who are also at the same stage. And by the way, on the flip of that, the people with 25 years, they want to hear from the 8 years, because when they started in HR, God, it was personnel. Then it became HR, and now it's the people function. So they want to get that fresh take on HR as well. I went off on a tangent there a little. I do that sometimes.
No, that's great. We love it. You mentioned earlier the 50 interviews that you did early on to sort of shape what Troop HR version 1 was going to look like. I'm curious, like, what has changed since then? Like, have the needs evolved? And if so, like, what is the biggest change, evolution of like what's needed from the HR community? What has changed over the last 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So we ourselves have grown. And I always say we're a close knit group of professionals. There's a lot of quote unquote communities out there that are really just transactional message boards, and they have a purpose. I mean, there's a need for those type of quick answer, quick response platforms. But Troop is different because there are people behind it. And so when we launched, we were a forum, transactional, and we were doing regular learning sessions. Then very quickly, members came back and said, I wish there were a way that we could connect more meaningfully. And so we launched something called our leadership squads, and that's group-based leadership coaching. And so now people were being placed in cohorts of 10 to 12 people on similar levels of experience where they could work out their day-to-day challenges. And there are facilitators also in those groups. Very soon after that, members came back and said, I love the learning sessions and you record them and have a library, and that's great, but I wish I just had the key takeaways. And so we launched our academy, which is our version of curriculum. We say snackable content because we format it 10 to 20-minute videos. And again, going back to earlier, real world professionals. 80% of our course creators for the academy are Troop members lending their expertise. And so what's great about that is not only do you get these quick takes on top issues in HR, but Then, if you want to speak further with the course creator, because they're a member, you can DM them in the community. And so we continuously evolve and find new ways to increase the engagement amongst our members. And then the other piece is we're paying attention to what they're talking about in the forum, not the responses, not the answers, but the themes, the topics. And we use that to drive the content we create so that we make sure we're delivering content that is timely and relevant for the community.
I want to ask a question that off script. I
Okay.
often do that. And
I'm ready for you.
my question is, why do you think, what is it about HR and the people function that has created this situation where there's a need for community? It feels like a pretty hardcore need. And I say that because if you were to ask Daniel and I, like, rank the top 3 things that you're hearing from people leaders, I think more community is one of them. We believe, or I believe, it's indicative of what's going on people leaders right now. And I think you have a unique view because you've worked in other functions, and it does feel like there are unique, I guess, challenges, issues that are driving this need for community. So just curious, what are your thoughts there?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. I mean, I think at the very top of that, when you think of the role of HR, I think historically people have looked at the HR professional as compliant, as making the rules, as doing the investigations. And so there's a preconceived notion about who HR is, which is one of the reasons I love the idea that we kind of use HR and the people function interchangeably now, because it really humanizes it. Second, I think it's really challenging because I think a lot of founders want what HR has to offer. But again, we're talking early stage organizations. When you're working at an early stage organizations, you're flying the plane as you're building it, and you need to be able to roll with that. And so I think because of that, there's friction between the founder's goals, the HR's needs and goals to keep them in compliance and why they're here, and then whether or not is HR representing the company or the people, because that's not always the same thing. And I think because there's always these sort of challenges going against each other, the HR leader has nowhere to turn because they can't go to the people within their organization because they're too close to it. And they can't go to the larger places because a lot of it is confidential. So they're looking for that safe space, that place where they can go, that other people will relate and understand these challenges. Now you throw something else into it, the global environment we're all living in. I mean, just this last week and coming up this week, we've had programming around how to support your colleagues during polarized times. It doesn't mean you have to talk about your opinions of the political landscape or of global affairs, but it's about showing up for people and doing it in a professional way. And so there's this fine line that we all walk on, trying to not project our opinions, but also be supportive of those around us. And I think TroopHR has people in it that really know how to do that from a strategic way and are not just trying to practice it, but knows the tools and resources. And so knowing you have somewhere safe to come to that you can ask those challenging questions, it takes a whole other level of stress off of your plate doing your job.
And I imagine as the founder of an HR community, in a way, you're having to do that as well. Like you want to provide a safe space for your members, but also, yeah, there is that fine line. So what has worked for Troop HR? You know, you've been around for a while. You've been through, I guess at this point, a couple election cycles. I'm sure you've seen it all at this point. Yeah, like any
Yeah.
advice on, because I'm sure this is something y'all are maybe dealing with right now.
Yeah, and I'll get vulnerable with you for a second. So last year after October 7th, obviously there were a lot of things going on in the world, in the workplace, opinions about what was going on. I'm Jewish. I have a very good friend in the community who is Muslim. We were checking in with each other on a daily basis because she was getting hate for her kids, also as Jews were getting hate in the world. And she reached out to me and said, Trey, I want to do something around this topic. And I very candidly said, Zamina, I'm afraid. I'm afraid that if we sit in this room with people, and by room I mean Zoom room, that someone might say something that upsets me. I won't react, but it changes perception. And what if I say something that upsets someone? It's not with any ill intent, it's just who we are as people. And she said, Tracy, we know each other a long time. I want you to trust me. I promise you that I will make it a safe space for us. And so we do these things called huddles, which are our group-based member discussions for members only. And she said, let's do a huddle. And typically I don't attend huddles because I want to give members that sort of safe space without me. And she said, please come with me. And so sometime towards the end of October of 2023, we hosted a huddle on just showing up for each other. It was the most amazing experience because, first of all, here, when I talk about having people who are experienced and know what they're doing, Zaman is Muslim, but she's also a DEI expert. And so she was there to lead the conversation in a way that it wasn't about people's opinions or thoughts, but about people feeling angst, people feeling worries, people feeling sadness, and how you could just be there. And so we had this conversation, and I walked away from it saying, like, these are the most amazing people in the world. And I'm talking about troop members because they want to be there for each other, even though they know they don't necessarily agree. Fast forward, here we are. And I made mention just a few minutes ago. I reached out to Zamina and I said, all right, we have the election coming up. Obviously, the world has gone in a whole other direction since October 7th. Like, I think we need to make space for each other again. And she said, Tracy, I'm with you. And so together this week, we're going to have that conversation. And I think as I'm even talking, I'm thinking about this. It's about not being afraid to tackle the hard conversations, but to do it with care and do it with love. And that's why I think troop members are really different than other professionals out there because they truly want to support each other, whatever that looks like.
And so for the huddles, and first off, like, congratulations on having this huddle. Um, I feel like you're, role modeling to your members how they should be having these conversations at their companies. What was the format? Like, was there like an agenda going into it? Was it just like an open conversation? And the reason I asked, because I imagine a lot of the people leaders listening are looking for, like, people love a framework. I know that, it's not going to work for everybody, but what was the agenda for that huddle?
So it was all Zamina. Her name is Zamina Leduc, and she's with the team at Assemble HR. And she just put together 3 questions that were really more or less probing questions about how people were feeling. So it set the tone to be about not just feelings, but our thoughts, not about, oh, I'm pro Trump or I'm pro Kamala. It's about people and that everyone has to respect other people's opinions and perspectives. And then it was really free flowing conversation. But I think, or I know, you need to have that trained, educated person in the room that can help guide the conversation. Because I'll tell you, even last week, so last week we did a fireside chat on a similar topic. Fireside chats for us are often open to the general public. So we had close to 100 people on this. It's more of a virtual session. And I did this one with Mita Malik, who I believe you guys know. She's a Wall Street Journal bestselling author, head of equity, inclusion, and impact at Carta. And Mita obviously is also an expert in this field. And so we sat down and said, okay, what are the questions we want to ask and what are the questions we don't want to ask? But we also wanted to open it to the audience because that's part of what Troop is. It's about making yourself vulnerable and being able to answer the tough questions. And so someone made a post in the chat, and Mita very quickly acknowledged their feelings. It was a little bit one-sided, the post, acknowledged their feelings and just kind of redirected it to say, okay, we want to be respectful of each other. Opinions are different, and that's okay. And what was interesting, one of the biggest takeaways from that session was one of the members that were on the call that said, you need to have guidelines in the workplace. It can't be a free for all because it is a professional environment. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be yourself, but there have to be guidelines. And again, you can debate this because I know not everyone agrees with that. But for me, I come from a world where I think guidelines and boundaries are really important to help set the stage so that you can have a productive conversation rather than one where it just gets about the emotions and you don't reach any kind of, you're never going to find a resolution, I suppose, but any kind of takeaway that you can feel that you've accomplished something from that conversation.
It's interesting to hear you walk through that example. We literally had this conversation at MPL Live in our first live event. The question was asked around election year. How do you handle the topic of politics in the workplace? And I think it was Gianna that said, I personally do not believe it's a company's position to take a political stance. And the reason for that is rooted in inclusion. And by taking a stance, we are like immediately excluding other people's thoughts and their opinion. And I personally, I see merit in that. I see that, like, just looking at the polls,
Right.
the reality is 1 in every 2 people everywhere, you have 2 people and they have differing opinions. That is like the likely outcome, right? If just you were to run into a stranger on the street. And so I think that that is something that we need to be thoughtful about. I think we need to be intentional about how we address these things or not. And Alex Seiler, who is another MPL community member, another friend of MPL, he was the first question when we opened up the Q&A. And his response was like, I don't know if I agree with that because I can't separate who I am, my work me, and my personal me with the political views. And the conversation played out very similar. Like, that's just because you don't take a political stance doesn't mean employees can't have their own personal views. We all have this democratic right. And I think it was Katie that was like, I believe that that's the focus, that we all have this democratic right and that there is a responsibility on the company to enable this democratic right. But outside of that, there's really no further obligation, in her opinion. And then she continued to say, look, that's not saying that there can't be conversations. And she went through 3 examples how you can have these conversations and be proactive and own your own experience within the company, but do it in a way that is healthy and productive. And it's so interesting to hear you say that and to like hear that conversation play out real time was pretty interesting for me. And with that, like, do you think HR topics are being politicized? Like, this is something I keep bringing up. This is one of my hot topics right now because for me, it sure does feel like it when I spend any amount of time in my LinkedIn feed, which is a lot less these days. Right now, I'm in a down with LinkedIn. So I'm just curious, like, what are your thoughts there? You have access to a lot of HR leaders, more than we do. And it's something that I'm picking up on. Just curious, what do you see?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think it's because HR isn't just compliance anymore. And now it does include talent and it does include DEI and it does include learning and development, which brings up other topics. And it does include healthcare, which brings in Roe v. Wade. So these are things that are topics that may not be HR, but they fall under the HR umbrella in some form or fashion. And so how do you manage that? How do you do it in a productive way is the question. And so it's about having your little bag of tricks. And so it's like if you see someone struggling, maybe they need a mental health day and you let them know and you train your managers so they know, please, the day after election, 50% of our population is going to be a really bad way, no matter which way you slice it. And so people are going to need time to regroup. And whether or not, I mean, again, I'll just say, like, I don't necessarily think that that regrouping should happen within the walls of the office, but resources should be available about where they can find tools. Again, they need to be moderated, but employee resource groups are great ways to support your teams. And so it's unavoidable. When someone comes to you in a state and I use this very real because people have posted about this in the forum, and says, I can't get an abortion in my state. Will you provide travel so I can go to a state where I can? Again, I'm not talking about what your opinion of abortion is here. It's like, does the company say, no, sorry, we can't help you with that? Or does the company support you? And it happens to be that the members that TroopHR attracts are the type of members that work for companies that want to support their employees. And so that might be a little bit of a hot button to even share, but you think of something like pro-choice, and that in and of itself is something that has fallen in the laps of HR leaders. And then does the founder's opinion matter about the way that the members should be treated or that their healthcare plan should be provided? I'm not answering, but these are the questions that HR has to answer because someone's making up that plan description for their health insurance. I mean, that is happening. So these are all things that wind up in HR, and it's unavoidable.
Yeah, so I feel like, the politics or HR being politicized is one side of the equation. And on the other side of the equation, you mentioned the job market is tough for people leaders. Budgets are tight for HR teams, and HR leaders are being asked to do more with less. And I think, Katie briefly mentioned this in MPL Live. We didn't really get to go as deep into it as I would have liked, but I'm curious, like, is this something that's being talked about in the TroopHR community? And if so, like, what are some of the thoughts?
I mean, absolutely. People have to cut their teams and still have to get the same amount of work done. And so, I think that's one of the reasons we've seen a pretty large influx of fractional HR consultants out there that are doing the same work. And we actually talk about the fact that someone gets handed a scope of work of 30 hours and they'll do it in 5, but it's going to take 30. So you can't do it in 5. And so it's challenging, and how do you manage it? I don't have the answer to that. I think we're all trying to sort of work through it. The other piece I will tell you, and it's crazy, the caliber of professionals out there that are looking for work and can't find it. And a lot of it becomes that they just don't want to pay HR professionals what have historically been the salaries that they're deserving of. And so this is an ongoing question that we're constantly talking about. I don't know what the solution is. I wish I had some ideas behind it because I think it would help a lot of people through these challenging times.
That's actually the first time that we've heard that. And I guess maybe we're not as privy to these negotiations. So that's something that's being felt pretty broadly.
Oh, I mean, again, in our little TroopHR microcosm, but yes, I absolutely. And again, keep in mind that a lot, not all, but a lot of our members come from the venture backed space. And so they're being told this runway that was supposed to last 18 months now has to last us 36 months. How do you do that? Yeah, the only way to do it is you cut jobs, but you still have to get the same amount of work completed. So it's kind of this little catch-22 that folks have, and again, then comes the burnout, then comes these other issues that we all talk about. That now again, like the HR leader now has to be the therapist because they're the one that everybody's coming to. So it's challenging to say the least.
I'm glad you brought that up. We're going to interview, I was about to give his name, but we're one of our future guests. We were going through the intake process, and it's a very simple intake for if the listeners are curious, like how do we make the sausage? We essentially ask 2 questions, like what's your story, and to give us all the details, and what's front of mind for you. And second question, can go a variety of different ways. And what was top of mind for this guest, it was that HR extremely burnout Like, we have been talking about burnout in HR since COVID happened, and it's almost 2025. So we're about to be 5-year anniversary. And here we are with, I think, a pockets individuals that are thriving. Well, it looks like it based on what you see on LinkedIn, but we're now hearing are huge pockets, multiple size bigger than the ones that are thriving, of HR people that are severely burnt out. And it was such a, top of mind that he wants that to be the topic of our conversation for our podcast. And that just really struck me, because I worry that maybe Daniel and I have been desensitized to just how bad it is, because we have these conversations with people leaders like every single week. And so I'm glad you brought that up. What do you think? I believe the biggest lesson learned from this cycle is that you cannot remove the macroeconomic situation and the business situation. And HR is a function of the business. And as a result, you can't extract the macroeconomic situation from your HR strategy, your HR programs, your HR practices, the software you're pitching to your CFO, the vendors you're selecting to work with. Like, it is like right now, there's just a lot of pressure. You said it yourself. The business goals are staying the same. The number of team members that we have to execute against those goals is shrinking. And so, like, how are we going to get through this? And do you agree first? And what are your views on how we get through this together?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think these are a lot of what these are the very issues of a lot of the topics that come up within the Troop Forum. And this is why people need community. And you'll see on LinkedIn that myself and other community leaders, we support each other because we're building our own communities. But a true community leader wants people to find their community wherever that is. And you have to find your people that you're. And so I think this is why we've also, besides the budgets being cut, I think this is why we've seen people hang up their own shingles so that they can create their own boundaries and do the work on a consulting basis. Now it opens up another question, because how do you prospect and build your business? Because now you're not just doing HR, but you have to sell yourself to build a practice. But we've been seeing a lot of people going out on their own because of the pressures that they're getting internally. And so I think that one other point to that is, and then of course, the first things to get cut besides people are our training budgets, our coaching budgets, all of the things that would help support someone going through a difficult time. And so we have to look and be resourceful and find these things. And so, again, going back to the employee resource groups within organizations, finding your communities in and out of the office, finding your podcast to listen to that can give you inspiration. I mean, we have to go back to some like grassroots tactics and just find and feel supported. And again, that's why, our first question here today was, what's your good news? So when I'm hearing about people that are finding that next role, it's really exciting, and we've talked about this too. One of the things at Troop, we launched a retreat. And yes, this is part of a business, but when you take a look at what the Troop Retreat is, the primary goal of why we launched it was to give our members a place to give back to themselves personally and professionally. It's an often thankless job. And so you have to create your own thankful situations. And so that is what we're constantly trying to do together as a community to support one another during the challenging times.
Something that I sort of pieced together last week at HR Tech after talking to people leaders, to fractional people leaders, to HR Tech founders, to marketing leaders at HR Tech companies, is that everything seems to be kind of, excuse my language, but like fucked. Like everything's kind of fucked right now. And nobody knows what to do. It's like HR budgets are getting cut. HR leaders are being asked to take roles for lower salaries. They're burnt out. Like, maybe I should go fractional. Going fractional, and they're finding that it's just as hard, because not only do you have to build your own business, but you're having to deal with the same issues on the fractional side, because HR teams don't have the same budgets for training and L&D. a lot of these, and that's just like one segment of like what they would spend their money on, but all of the HR tech vendors that are selling training L&D solutions are struggling to sell. Nobody in HR tech, I mean, I was so surprised. Nobody has sales pipeline. Nobody is meeting their numbers. I don't really have like a question for you. This is more of just an observation, but I don't really know what to do with that. That was something that I guess we like suspected, but
Hence my comment. I left HR Tech with more questions than answers, because it's like, what is actually happening right now, guys?
And it's, if we had this conversation 18 months ago, I would say it's mental health. If I had heard one more mental health solution that's going to fix, now it's all about AI coaching. And what the piece that, like you said, this puzzle is that there's an overabundance of vendors in this space trying to fix these very clear problems, but the companies don't have the budgets to let the problems be fixed. So how do we do this? And I'm going to say something bold, but I think it is community. I think it is finding your people, because when times get tough, you can't just give up. You got to persevere and you got to keep going. And that's not easy. We could have a whole other conversation about things I've overcome in my life, but it's something that you have to keep going. And so you can't do it on your own. No one can. And so that's why when I see other communities post, and I'm going to like it, because we all need to find our people. We all need to find our place. And I think the way that you do that is with friends and colleagues who you have these relationships with to get through these challenging times. And a good friend of mine, I call her my little angel on my shoulder. Her name is Lan Fan. She runs something called the Community of Seven. And she's just always reminding me it's the small steps. If you look at the big picture of what we need to get through, no one's going to be able to accomplish anything. But you take those baby steps, and if that means if you're out of work, submitting 10 applications, even if the chances of you getting those roles is low, if you don't submit it, that chance is zero. So you got to just keep pushing forward. And again, very easy to say in the context of this conversation, a lot harder when you're going through those challenges. But that again is where you have your community to help push you through those challenging times.
One of the biggest positive changes that I have seen in the post-COVID world, it's part community, the fact that this emergence of more communities, better serving in a newer way, not the old form of community for HR, and this open sourcing of HR, sharing of ideas. Because I remember a day when you would guard this stuff like state secrets. And so I think that's a perfect place to end the conversation, Tracy, because we agree with you. I think I can speak for Daniel on this one, that like community is definitely part of the answer here. And I think my call to action is, find community. For those listening, talk to the TroopHR folks. If that doesn't feel like the right fit, there are other great communities out there also, but just find your people. Because the one thing I do know, for as many people that are burnt out and frustrated, it feels like there's an equal number of people that want to help. And so that gives me a lot of hope. And with that, I'm going to take us into rapid fire questions. We're going to turn the corner. And so same set of questions we ask every guest. Tracy, you ready to do this?
I am ready.
Awesome. Let's go. Excuse me, I'm going to start this over. If you could go back in time and talk to a 22-year-old you, what career advice would you give yourself and why?
I promise that you will learn and grow the most from the challenges. How fitting from what we just spoke about. You need the battle scars to realize the success that will come to you.
I agree. You do need the battle scars. All right. If you could fix any HR or people problem with a magic wand, what would it be and why?
Budgets, within reason, of course, but budgets, if you want to get things done, you need money to do it. And we need to move away from HR being a cost center. Your people are your most valuable asset, and you need to invest in that.
Oh my God, I totally get behind that. Next question. When you look around the corner to the end of 2024 and beyond, what do you see coming next for the future of work?
think it has to be lifelong learning. I know, again, we talked about budgets being cut from that, but in order to keep up with the new tools, the new tech, the new ways of work, especially as AI becomes more ingrained in the work we do, we need to continuously evolve and learn. And no matter how senior you are, there's always an opportunity to learn something new.
And last question, who do we need to have onto the show next? I mean, I mean, we're asking the right person, and this might be hard for you to pick, but who are 2 or 3 names that come to mind?
So one person right off the bat, I don't know if she's been a guest, is Rebecca Price. Rebecca is a former CHRO, again CHRO, partner at Premier Venture Partners. She herself is a talent leader, experienced HR pro, but she also gets to see how these other new companies are formulating HR and their people functions in her role at Primary. And she's also just an amazing human. The other person who you may have had is Jessica Zwan. You have had her, okay, because she's amazing, and I love that she really helps HR leaders and products come together to enhance the people experience. And I believe you've had Mita as well, but I mean, especially in this world we're living in now, thought leader like Mita Malik is crucial. You talk about community, the modern people leader community is listening, wanting answers, wanting solutions, ideas. And when you have people like that on the stage, that's how you get them.
I love that idea of having Mita back. It was such a different world when we had her on. Feels like, I mean, it was only a few years ago, which is crazy, but love it. And that gets us to our final tradition. We call it one word or phrase close. So we all respond with a word or few, just something that as we reflect on the last hour and change, how we want to wrap things up. And again, Tracy, we prefer for our guests to go first.
You got it. I'm not great at one word, so I'll give you like a quick phrase. And again, this is what our conversation has been about. Whether it's TroopHR or something else, find your community, find your people. We all need them to support and celebrate us.
Steven, you want to go next?
I'll go next. Yeah, because I know Tracy just took I can see your one phrase close. So I'm going to go with, we'll get through this. I'm feeling optimistic. I was feeling a little bit down, I think mainly because I was with NPL Live and HR Tech back to back. I was feeling exhausted, and
I'm hungover from like the 2 weeks of activity.
And I think that kind of got into my mindset, but we've got this. This is a great, Tracy, can we like have you on call Monday mornings just so we can energize ourselves?
Always.
Awesome.
I'm just a text away.
And I'm going to end with my people. I mean, Tracy, you are our people. You've already been so helpful to both of us. I mean, we have time on the calendar for later this week to catch up. I feel like this is going to be an ongoing thing, and we're lucky to have you as a part of our community. And we can't wait to support you and your community. And yeah, this was the best way to re-energize myself on a Monday morning.
The feelings are mutual, guys. Really appreciate it and the work you do.
Thanks so much for joining us, Tracy. You did not disappoint. This has been a fun conversation.
Thank you, guys. The feelings are mutual, and just excited for all that's to come.
All right. Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.